We're going to start back up this afternoon with a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is mobile marketing. I was one of those people back in the day who had a Palm Pilot, remember those? That had a modem attached to it, because I was convinced that I needed to know what was happening with the world of mobile so that I could keep up with the opportunities that would be available to marketers. And that's why I'm so excited, and I'm sure many of you are too, that mobile has really come into its own in the last few years. And one of the foremost experts on the topic is Cindy Krum, our next speaker. She's CEO of MobileMoxie. She has been a regular conference speaker, and she's presented and trained in-house teams throughout the US and around the world. She's also part of the faculty at Rutgers University, where she teaches mobile marketing as part of a digital mini MBA program. And her little known fact is that she is a twin. She's Cindy and her brother is Bobby. And no, I'm sure they never got a hard time about being the youngest members of the Brady Bunch. Again, dating myself, like so many of our speakers. But welcome, Cindy.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yay. All right. So thanks for the great introduction, Pamela. Like you said, my name is Cindy Krum. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called MobileMoxie based in Denver, Colorado. We do mobile SEO consulting and mobile marketing strategy. I would love the clicker. Okay. And so today, I'm going to be talking about the intersection of mobile marketing and big data, which is a topic that I think is really fascinating. I was doing my intro. So a little bit of other background is I've written a book about mobile marketing. It's been translated into 5 languages. And I have lots of really amazing, awesome clients that I love to talk about, like MTV and CNN and lots of great companies. So yay me! So now that that's over, the things that I normally talk about, the things that I normally write about, usually involve cross-device compatibility, mobile marketing, mobile SEO, page speed, app store SEO, the intersection of mobile and social, mobile usability, stuff like that. But the things that I normally think about, the things that I normally read about, are more about the future and where the things that we're doing with mobile marketing are going to impact our daily lives as we move into the future. So one of the great examples of this is like a self-driving car. And if you think about what a self-driving car is, it has to take in loads of data to understand the world around it and then take action on that data immediately so that it doesn't hurt anyone or cause any accidents or anything like that. So one self-driving car generates about 1 gigabyte of data per second, 2 petabytes of data per year. So at this point, if everyone were driving a driverless car, it would melt the cloud. That's too much, right? But we're getting to the point where people are saying that may be a possibility. And I like this quote, it cracked me up. If GM had kept up with technology like the computer industry has, we'd all be driving $25 cars that go 1,000 miles per gallon. That's not the case. So we've got to find the intersection of where the technology and the futuristic thinking come together. So let's talk about big data. What is big data? Wikipedia says that big data is when you're evaluating data sets so large and complex that it becomes difficult to process using on-hand database management tools or traditional data processing applications. So you can't just use the computer you've got, even if you're in Access or a more sophisticated database. That's just not enough processing power. So deep CRM with micro-targeting, active social participation with data mining, rules-based marketing optimization, predictive analysis, and algorithm development. All those things are awesome, but they actually don't generally count as big data. Big data is bigger than that. It involves data so large that it's measured in things like gigaflops and teraflops, which are measurements of consecutive and concurrent, hundreds of thousands of concurrent processing instances per second. So huge amounts of data. So let's talk about what makes that possible. With big data, we rely a lot on cloud-based processing, because in the cloud you can distribute the processing across a bunch of different machines and have parallel processing of these gigaflops and teraflops of data going on all at once, spread out widely. So cloud-based computing is necessary for real-time big data automation. But what's important to understand as we move into the future is that the cost of cloud space for processing is going way down, and the storage ability is growing exponentially. So we can put way more and more data in the cloud for way less money. And they're even developing new methods of monetizing that, like renting cloud space for processing this kind of data. And so it's just becoming much easier for companies to access. So when you take the understanding of big data and put it with the understanding of mobile. So mobile is changing a lot in the past couple of years. 10, 15 years ago, people would talk about the mobile nomad as the guy who took his computer to a coffee shop and did work there. And that's not mobile anymore. Now, mobile is our phones, our tablets, and even it's going further into the web-enabled watches, wearables, and basically anything that isn't a desktop or a laptop is kind of getting lumped in with mobile because people don't know how to handle it. Things like, I even get lots of questions about web-enabled TVs and kiosks at malls and stuff like that. So anything that's not a computer is kind of getting put with mobile right now. So you have to understand that mobile is really everywhere, and it's a great method of collecting lots of different kinds of data. So we obviously have phones, tablets, wearables, and sensors, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But we're getting into more things that are either going to be considered mobile or that are going to be treated like mobile, especially in their ability to gather data. So things like cars, smart buildings, smart cities, stuff like that. The Internet of Things is really where we get to a point where all of our stuff can communicate with our phones, and that means that we have lots more data to process and as a potential informer for marketing. And so we have great data that's everywhere coming from all these mobile devices. We have constant transmission coming from the phones over Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, LTE, and our stuff, and the Internet of Things, constantly sending different streams of data. So let's talk about sensors. RFID and NFC is a big deal in terms of big data because they're very cheap to produce and they're getting put in lots of different things. This is what really makes the Internet of Things possible, because these little chips are put in your pets, if your pets are microchipped. They're put in your badges if you swipe in and out of a building. They're put in key fobs if you swipe in and out of a garage. They're put in tires to track tires. Lots and lots of things have these little chips that can actively and passively send and transmit bits of data, and they cost like 30 cents a piece. And there are rumors that the next iPhone 6 is going to have NFC or RFID capabilities. Android phones already do many times. If you're tapping to pay, that's done with a chip like this. So chips are everywhere, and they create the ability to have constant streams of data. So here's the hypothesis. Here's what I want to tell you and talk to you about it today, which is that there's a new paradigm for mobile marketing, and it's all about leveraging these constant streams of data from all different devices and giving it a monetizable value. So first off, you have to think about understanding the data that you're getting in. That's what we do already, right? You're looking at your web reports, you're looking at all the data, and you're trying to understand your customers, what motivates them, what makes them buy, what makes them behave. But beyond that, we can talk about mining your data. And this is things like going deeper and looking for things that you weren't looking for before. So the example for data mining that I like to use is when Google took all the searches that were related to the flu. And they realized that the medical boards were trying to show and predict where the flu was spreading, and they weren't doing a very good job of it because what happened was the doctors were reporting it. And so people were waiting a couple days after they got sick to go to the doctor to make sure they were really sick, and then the doctor was doing the tests, running the tests, and then also waiting a couple of days to report when they had gotten a new case of the flu. And what Google realized was that way before people go to the doctor, people were searching for symptoms of the flu. And so in a real-time way, they were able to create these digital interactive maps that showed the spread of the flu just based on a certain set of searches that were related to it. So they mined the data that they already have to do something really cool that they had never intended to do. Beyond that, there are great examples of merging data, merging totally different data sets to find out new, interesting information. The obvious example here is Zillow. Zillow took information from the MLS, crossed it with Google Maps or Big Maps, with the GPS locations of all the properties, and created a new website, a new product that's really useful, something that people hadn't thought of before. But a different example, a bigger kind of data example that I like, is the country of Denmark. So the country of Denmark has socialized medicine, so they know everyone in the country, and they know their medical records. But they also have basically one carrier for cell phone service. So they knew everyone's phone number and everyone's cell phone history, and they knew everyone's medical records. And so they decided, and this was years ago, when people thought that maybe cell phones were causing brain cancer, they said, we can answer this question actually. We can take and match up this set of data, which is the health records, with this set of data, which is the number of minutes everyone is spending on their phone. And they definitively proved that cell phone use doesn't cause brain cancer. So that was cool. So merging it, sharing it, or selling it. And selling it is another one that I like a lot. The example here is Telefonica. Telefonica is a big Latin American cell phone carrier. And they had all this information about where people were making their phone calls, when people were making their phone calls, how long the phone calls were lasting. And they thought for sure someone might care about this. So they made a spin-off company that just sold anonymized data about the Telefonica subscribers and said, look, here are the different psychographic and demographic informations about our subscriber base and the different plans, and they grouped people by how much they were spending on their cell phone bill, what to make inferences about what the demographic was, and then this is how they behave. This is when they're doing searches from their phone. This is when they're making phone calls or sending text messages instead. And as long as that's anonymous, that's awesome, right? No problems at all. And that's a new venue of business for Telefonica. Okay, so let's talk about why this isn't happening now. There's a very unsophisticated way, in some cases, of thinking about the mobile web and mobile apps and things like that. Developers tend to think in a silo, and they think, okay, so we have this mobile device, and we have a person who wants to do stuff with it, and we have the server, and they kind of allow the person to control what stays on the mobile device and what stays on the server. But the problem is, first off, they're not always thinking about the other things that are happening on that phone. And in reality, lots of things happen on a phone that can be leveraged to save people time and to make their life easier. And a lot of those things can be passed up to the server, but aren't being passed up to a server or the cloud because they leave the person in charge. The person is the barrier. And so when you add in other devices, it gets really complicated, right? People don't understand why if they downloaded a song to their phone, it didn't reach their tablet, or if they bought an app on their tablet, it didn't make it to the phone, and vice versa. And people really just don't care, right? For the most part, they don't understand the difference. They don't care. And things would be easier if companies took a little bit of control out of the user's hands, because they don't miss it, and helped make their life easier by doing something like this, where you take the information from the phone, push as much of it as you can up to the cloud, and allow it to populate to the other devices automatically. And some really great companies that we all use are already doing this. Things like Dropbox, Amazon, stuff like that, are making our lives easier, and they're making their product more effective by moving as much of the data up to the cloud and making it happen seamlessly across all of our different devices. So that's awesome. And that's kind of moving us closer and closer towards big data as we have things like APIs where one data set can talk to another data set, and you can start merging things and doing cool stuff. So that's awesome. But when you realize that we add in sensors and we're on the precipice of this mass kind of population of more and more sensors that are able to interact with our phones and our other devices all the time, then that becomes loads of constant streams of data all the time. And that's really when we get into real big data. So this gets us into the question of what can mobile track? And in fact, mobile can track a lot. And I love watching like the conspiracy theory people because they're generally right. This is a national NSA logo. The NSA has loads of information about you that you wish that they probably, if you knew, you would wish that they didn't. So let's break it down. Native apps can track a little bit more than web apps, right? Native apps can track anything that interacts with the operating system on your phone, anything that you submit into the app, any in-app purchase. They can track time, location, and device type all the time, and any web request. So those are the easy things to track. There are more difficult things to track just by pulling metadata, from stuff on the phone. So like every time, for instance, every time you take a picture with your camera phone, it gets a location stamp in the background that you can't see. But if I'm Instagram and I'm pulling down loads of your photos, I could be getting way more data than you think. And actually, as it turns out, about 40% of the apps in the App Store are tracking location right now in ways like that, either explicitly or implicitly by pulling in metadata from the elements that aren't specifically a location. When we're talking about web can track a little bit less. They can track web submissions, downloads of purchases, time, location, device, most of the stuff that you're used to tracking in your web analytics. So it's not as much. You can get a little bit of location. It's not as good, but you can still get lots of information. And I say if the NSA can do it, you should do it too. But the difference is, as marketers, we have to ask for permission. And if you're looking at your device, go ahead and look up at this slide. It's very clear. Do you see the cameras? We have to ask permission. As marketers, you have to be transparent. You have to say, here's the information that we might pull from your device or your interaction with our app. Here's what we might use it for. And here's why you shouldn't worry about that. And in general, people will give you permission because they want the app to work properly. And they don't have time to read your very long statement about the privacy stuff. And as it turns out, we did some study that said that if people actually read all the T's and C's that they blindly accepted on the internet, that it would take a week of their life every month just to read through all that stuff. So they probably won't read it. So go ahead and get permission just for CYA purposes, and you're good. So let's go into some examples of what kind of big data you could be pulling from apps and websites. I'd love to talk about the growing health trend with mobile devices. So loads of people are using their devices to track their diets, their exercise routines, cholesterol, lots and lots of stuff. In fact, in the next iOS version, they're going to come out with the Health Kit, iOS Health Kit, and also iOS Home Kit, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's just to help people who are already using things like Fitbit to track their steps and stuff like that. And all of this stuff, a lot of it right now is held either on the device or held within the company that created the app. Fitbit is one of the examples that's not doing that, that's putting the information into an API. And this creates lots of really cool big data possibilities. If we have, for instance, someone's information about their exercise habits, and maybe we get lots of people using the Fitbit API, then we can do cool things like maps to show, which location is the fittest or does the most exercise. Or we could have competitions between this neighborhood and that neighborhood, or this city and that city, on who exercises the most, or who can run the most miles, or things like that. So that's really cool. But also, think about diet trackers and food calorie counters, right? They're really powerful because people essentially put in their grocery shopping needs, and they tell you what they've already bought. And you can even take it to the next level and see, like, when someone's on their diet and they're doing awesome and you want to keep them going and you want to say, hey, how about some kale? Versus when they're off their diet and you say, hey, Pop-Tart, right? And that's how you can use that information and the big data to send the right ads, but also to help stocking shelves, right? They've done studies that show that certain weather events actually do drive people to buy certain things. Oddly enough, hurricanes drive up the sale of strawberry Pop-Tarts like crazy. Like, that's not what I want when there's a hurricane, but lots of people do. And so Walmart knows to watch the weather, and when there's a hurricane, they stock up on the strawberry Pop-Tarts. And so other companies could be doing that too, to an even deeper level, if they had the information that people were just putting into their calorie counters. So the truth about mobile is, we really know where you live, or if we don't, we should, right? Whatever app you have, whatever website you have, you should be tracking as much data as possible. And like I said, 40% of the apps available in the App Store right now do track data. And if you think about Google's cross-device tracking that they announced 6 months ago or 8 months ago, their goal now is to track when someone does a search from a tablet and then converts on the phone or on the desktop, right? That's cool. But they've also added something that's a dinky spreadsheet upload so that you can track offline conversions that start online. So people searching for Best Buy, something at Best Buy, they find it on their phone, they check it out on their tablet, and then eventually they go into the store and buy it. I think the spreadsheet thing isn't going to last. There's no reason it should, because Google can know where you are. As long as you have Google Maps or Gmail or any of the Google apps loaded on your phone, they know where you are already. So they can just correspond the data about where you are with the known locations for Best Buy and track that. I think they haven't done it yet just because they're trying to not look so creepy, but I think they can, and they will. And you should too. Anything like that where you can correlate people's location to a behavior that's related to your business, that's really meaningful. Where do people go before they come to your business? Where do they go after they go to your business? How often and in what situations do they arrive at your locations? All that information is super powerful, and if you have an app, it can be running in the background and tracking that and passing it all the time. So I mentioned the Internet of Things. And this is kind of what that might look like. When things have sensors in them, they can interact with your phone or your tablet or whatever. And so there's no reason that they shouldn't. The sensors, like I said, are really cheap, and we can start putting them in more and more things, right? So let's say we had a house that was all sensored up. It would know when I'm home and could do things based on that, just because it knows I don't go anywhere without my cell phone, right? So once it sees that the cell phone is within range, it can do things like turn the water heater back on, turn the temperature back down or up, depending on my personal preferences. If my mom was home, like her cell phone would make everything freezing, but for me it would be different. But it could even see when my pet is home, because the pet's microchipped, potentially. So lots of different things could be triggered just by you walking in the door. And that's really cool. But then you expand that to entire buildings or entire cities, and we can do things to save lots of energy, like automatically turn the water heaters and the air conditioning off when everyone leaves the house, or automatically turn off all the lights when there's no cell phones in the house. And that can make cities, cities, buildings, all that, way more efficient, way more secure, super cool. So go ahead and look up at the slide again, please. This one's funny. So I think this is a reality, right? It's talking about the ability or the potential for Google to market to people based on what their web-enabled smoke alarm is doing, right? And it's a bit macabre, but I think it's a reality, and it's really the future, right? As marketers, we need to be taking the data from stuff and using it to help us promote or provide the services, or at least the access to the services that people need based on their behavior, based on their lives. So big data people talk a lot about traffic, and traffic has lots of really cool marketing opportunities too, right? Because we know where people are, because every time, like your cell phone, my cell phone's set to check email every 5 minutes. If it could do it every 1, I would. So every time my cell phone checks email, it gets a location stamp, right? It knows where I am, how fast I'm going, and in what direction. So there's no reason that we couldn't use that to watch traffic and say, oh my gosh, all of these people who are approximately on XYZ highway are going 0 miles per hour all of a sudden, right? So that's interesting. Could be used for government projects, blah, 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 but it could also be used for marketing. Wouldn't that be great if somehow the carriers shared that information with us as marketers, and the local pubs or what have you at the exits around that area sent a text message that said, hey, why are you stuck in traffic? We're having a happy hour. Why don't you take the next exit, right? So real-time interactive marketing that has meaningful conversions that happen right away. So that's really cool. You can also see like when people are lost. If we were following someone who was constantly like going in circles, we would know as a city like where to put better signage, or maybe we're at a conference where people are getting lost, so you station a person to help them out. Lots of interesting stuff there. Now everyone probably saw this, but Facebook is one of the biggest purveyors or collectors of data available. If you read FBI and CIA stuff, they talk about how, like, in their best imagination, they could have never created such a great resource as Facebook for tracking people and understanding what people are doing. And so Facebook does create algorithms to understand people based on their posting history, based on their posting frequency, based on who they're tagged in with friends, to the point that before you've posted anything about your relationship status, they know when you're about to change your relationship status. And they said they could predict it down to like 2 or 3 days. So that's crazy, but it's available and it's awesome. And remember, stuff like social media, Facebook, Twitter, that's more than half mobile, right? So that's another thing to think about if you're doing marketing stuff, is how are people interacting with your brand from their mobile phones on social media. And there are companies that you've never heard of that know lots of information. Their whole job is tracking this kind of information. So we know that the credit companies like Experian know way more about us than they should, but companies like Axicom has roughly 1,500 data points on the average American, down to things like right-handed or left-handedness, what kind of a car you drive, do you have pets, and if so, what kind. They even have more soft data, like what your psychological outlook on life is. So that's lots of stuff that as marketers, we could be working with these guys. Or if it terrifies you, you could not. But it's out there. The data's out there, and I think you have to embrace it. So, in the wrap-up, when you're thinking about the future of mobile, when you're thinking about the future of big data, remember, your data is an asset. Whatever data you can track from mobile interaction, you should. Beyond that, you should understand it, think about mining it, merging it with other data sources, sharing it, or selling it.